Hi, you're on the Reddit Confessions channel. She didn't expect me to say anything. Honestly, neither did I. I had been silent for so long that my voice almost startled me when it came out. Stay and listen, or walk away. Those were the exact words. Not dramatic, not loud, just final. She blinked, not in surprise, but in that way people do when you interrupt their performance. Like I was stepping on her moment. And then she smiled. That horrible, knowing, you won't actually do anything kind of smile. It happened in a room full of people. Her people. Friends she'd gathered like trophies, stylish, loud, too polished. I never belonged in that crowd. But I stood my ground anyway, surrounded by champagne flutes and Bluetooth speakers humming some forgettable playlist. She didn't answer me. She just turned to him. Yeah, him. He didn't even pretend to be subtle. He stood up beside her like he had already won. Like this was a game he'd finished hours ago, and I was just now showing up to lose. He picked up her coat before she moved. That's how in sync they were. She glanced back at me once. Only once. And I swear to you, the room went dead quiet in that half second. Not because anyone cared about me, but because they knew. The silence wasn't sympathy. It was secondhand shame. I could feel their eyes. Their relief that it wasn't happening to them. She left with him. Just like that. No speech. No apology. Not even a "we'll talk later." I stood there holding the box. Yeah, the box. I hadn't planned to give it to her that night. It was in my jacket pocket, something I'd carried around for 2 weeks trying to find the right moment. A tiny velvet case. Inside was a bracelet, engraved with the coordinates of the place we met. It suddenly felt like a joke. Like I was the only one who thought this was still salvageable. Like I had walked into a movie halfway through and thought I was the main character. I didn't chase her. Didn't scream. I just stood still. And after everyone went back to their drinks, after the music volume was nudged back up and someone nervously asked who brought the cupcakes, I walked to the door, stepped outside, and left. No goodbye, no scene, no begging, just gone. But that was only the beginning. What I found the next morning, on her laptop, was the real reason she didn't even hesitate. I didn't sleep that night. You'd think it was the shock or the humiliation or the weight of watching your wife leave with another man in front of an audience. But honestly, it wasn't even that. What kept me awake was the silence. The kind that presses against your ears like underwater pressure. I kept expecting the front door to creak open. For her to return and act like nothing happened. For her to lie. To cry. To explain. But she didn't. I sat in the kitchen long after midnight, staring at my untouched coffee. Her laptop was still on the table, lid half open, humming softly. She never left it lying around. She treated it like a second phone, password protected, always zipped in a sleeve. But that night, in her rush to leave with him, she forgot it. I didn't plan to snoop. I really didn't. But after an hour of sitting there like some discarded ghost, I tapped the trackpad and the screen lit up. No password, just open tabs. One click, and the world I thought I lived in shattered. At first it was small things. A tab opened to a Google Doc titled Plans. I thought maybe it was a work document. But no, it was personal. Organized. Dated. Each entry logged like journal notes. And every single one of them mentioned him. Devin. Her co-worker. Except he wasn't just a co-worker. He had been her escape plan. There were entries from over a year ago. Ellis barely notices anything anymore. Devin says I should stop shrinking to fit a life I've outgrown. That line hit like a punch to the throat. Shrinking. That's what she called me, trying to be steady. Trying to be stable. I kept reading. She talked about how she was testing my reactions. How she would wear something provocative or flirt with Devin in front of me just to see if Ellis would finally act like a man. I stopped breathing. She had been daring me to explode. And when I didn't, she took that as weakness. I wasn't silent because I didn't care. I was silent because I loved her too much to accuse her without proof. I thought trust meant restraint. Apparently, to her, it meant impotence. But the worst part wasn't the notes. It was the photos. Not graphic, nothing explicit. She wasn't that careless. But enough. Pictures of hotel lobbies. Devin's hand on her back in selfies. Her laughing in a mirror while he kissed her neck. And one photo, time-stamped the same night she told me she was stuck in traffic, showed them clinking glasses at some rooftop lounge. Her wearing the same red dress she later claimed she bought for our anniversary. I shut the laptop. My hands were shaking. Not from anger, but from realization. She had already left me long before she walked out the door. I didn't go to work the next day. I just sat there in the living room, still in the same wrinkled clothes from the night before, watching the light change on the walls as hours passed. The laptop sat in front of me, like some open wound I couldn't stop staring at. I didn't touch it again. I didn't need to. I'd seen enough. Enough to know that whatever we had wasn't just broken, it had been replaced. And I was the last one to notice. Around noon, the doorbell rang. I almost didn't get up. For a second, I thought, stupidly, that it might be her, that she'd finally realized what she'd done, that maybe, just maybe, she regretted it. But it wasn't her. It was a courier. A plain envelope. No return address. No signature. Just my name on the front, in her handwriting. Inside was a key. Just a single key. Not to our house. Not to our storage unit. It was older. Silver worn. Attached was a sticky note with 3 words, "Figure it out." I must have read that note 50 times before I moved. My hands were shaking so badly I dropped it twice. I had no idea what it meant. But part of me, the part that had always believed she was smarter than me, more mysterious, more in control, knew it had to lead somewhere. Shayla didn't do anything without intention. If she sent me that key, she wanted me to find something. It took 3 hours and a panic attack in my car before I remembered. The key was to her old storage locker, one she rented back when we first moved in together. I thought she'd closed it years ago. When I asked her back then why she kept it, she said, "Everyone needs a space that's only theirs." I laughed it off like it was quirky. But standing in front of the metal door that afternoon, sweating, heartbeat in my ears, I realized it wasn't quirky. It was a vault for the truth. The key slid in smooth, like it had never been replaced. I lifted the door and blinked. At first glance, it looked harmless, just a few plastic bins, old clothes, framed photos from her college days. But then I saw it. A sealed envelope on top of a stack of boxes. My name again. Inside, a printed itinerary. Hotel bookings. Train tickets. Her resignation letter, dated for the following week. A list of tasks. Call Ellis's mom. Cancel joint account. Transfer final paycheck. She hadn't just left me. She had planned my erasure. And the part that broke me the most? Her last note at the bottom. He won't fight. He never does. I sat on the concrete floor of that storage unit for over an hour. The fluorescent light flickered above me like it was mocking my every breath. I kept reading the itinerary over and over again, hoping, begging, that I'd find something redeemable in it. A hesitation, a crossed outline, a scribbled regret. But there was none. Every line was precise. Her plan was clinical, organized, practiced, like she'd been mentally preparing to disappear long before she ever physically walked out of our life. When I finally stood up, my knees ached. My whole body felt heavier, as if shame had weight. I drove home in silence. No music, no podcasts, just the hum of tires on pavement and the sound of my own betrayal echoing inside my skull. Every red light felt like punishment. Every couple I saw crossing the street made my stomach twist. I kept thinking, they don't know it yet, but one of them might already be gone. Back home, I found the house exactly how she left it. A half-empty glass on the table. Her perfume still lingering in the hallway. But something had changed me. I wasn't numb anymore. I was boiling, not with anger, but confusion. Why the key? Why send me into her treasure chest of destruction? Then it hit me. She wanted me to find it. Not because she regretted it, but because she wanted me to understand that none of it was an accident. That she didn't just leave, she designed her exit. Her cruelty wasn't impulsive. It was methodical. I walked into our bedroom and stared at the bed we shared for almost a decade. And I noticed something small, something I hadn't seen before. A flash drive sitting on her pillow. My heart thudded. She'd left that too. Not hidden. Not buried. Presented. Like the last act of a sick performance. I plugged it into my laptop, half hoping it would be blank. Instead, there was a single file. A video. It was her, sitting on that very same bed, smiling. Not nervously, not sadly, but confidently. "Hey Ellis," she said, like she was greeting an old friend she didn't want to see again. "If you're watching this, I guess you opened the locker. Took you longer than I thought. But at least you got there." She paused, smiled again. "There's not much else to say, honestly. You already know I'm gone. You'll probably try to understand, and I get that. But please don't make this about something I did to you. This was always going to happen. You just didn't want to see it." She tilted her head, eyes soft but unbothered. "You were the safest place I ever knew. but not the place I wanted to stay. Then the screen went black. No goodbye, no apology, not even a pause. Even her closure was scripted. I didn't eat that day. I don't remember drinking water. I couldn't even cry. I just sat there, frozen in that post-video haze, trying to wrap my head around how someone could deliver a goodbye so surgically, with no remorse, no hesitation, not even an ounce of warmth for the man who once held her through panic attacks at 2 a.m. She looked into the camera like she was filming a product demo, not ending a marriage. Her message was simple. This wasn't an accident. You were never part of the next draft of my life. That night, I slept on the couch. Not because I couldn't go into the bedroom, but because I felt like I didn't belong in it anymore. It was her stage now. Every pillow, every drawer, every faint imprint on the mattress reminded me I was just a fading character in someone else's carefully edited script. The next morning, I called out sick again. I lied. Said I had a stomach bug. I couldn't tell my supervisor the truth. My wife walked out with a man she rehearsed leaving me for. Oh, and she left me a flash drive with a farewell video like this was some Netflix drama. Who would even believe that? By noon, I was still on the couch, watching the same lamp flicker in the hallway when my phone buzzed. It was a number I didn't recognize. I let it go to voicemail. Then it buzzed again. And again. Third time, I picked up, more out of dread than curiosity. It was Shayla's sister, Morgan. She didn't even say hello. Just launched into it. Ellis, I'm not supposed to be calling you, but I can't keep pretending I don't know what she's doing. I didn't speak. I couldn't. I just stared ahead, lips parted, listening. She's in Savannah, Morgan continued. With Devin. They're staying at some Airbnb she's been planning to rent for months. I thought she was going on a solo retreat, but she just posted pictures to her private account, the one she never told you about. I still said nothing. She's saying you agreed to separate, and that you're peacefully moving on. Ellis, she's rewriting the story, and people are buying it. That's when the nausea kicked in. Not just at the betrayal, but at the lie. She wasn't just walking away. She was repainting the past, rebranding herself, casting me as the silent, weak ex who had accepted it all without protest. And I had until now. Morgan lowered her voice. She's telling people you weren't passionate, that you didn't fight for her, that you checked out years ago. You know that's not true. It was like being buried under a landslide of silence you never consented to. She's having a dinner party down there next week, Morgan added. Just thought you should know. She hung up. No advice. No permission. Just knowledge. And now I had a choice. I didn't pack much. Just a duffel bag with some wrinkled shirts, a toothbrush, and a bracelet I never got to give her. Not because I thought I'd return it, but because I needed to feel the weight of it in my hand. A reminder that I wasn't imagining this entire collapse. I booked a motel 3 blocks from the Airbnb, address Morgan whispered to me over the phone. I didn't even tell her I was going. I think she knew I wouldn't stay put. Men like me don't explode. We simmer until the quiet becomes unbearable. The drive to Savannah was long. I didn't listen to music. I couldn't. I needed the silence to prepare. Not for confrontation. I wasn't built for that. But for the moment I'd see her again. For the second she'd realize I wasn't just fading away like she hoped. She wanted a clean exit. She wanted the credit for being the grown-up. I wasn't going to scream or cry or beg. I just wasn't going to vanish. The Airbnb was tucked away on a shaded street lined with crepe myrtles and overpriced Teslas. It looked like something out of a magazine. White brick, navy shutters, string lights on the porch. A perfect little lie. Through the window, I could already hear the murmur of voices, the clinking of wine glasses, the low hum of curated jazz. I waited, just until the laughter got comfortable, until the second course was probably plated, and she was exactly where she wanted to be, admired, adored, the centerpiece of her own reinvention. Then I knocked. When the door opened, it wasn't her. It was him. Devin. Hair gelled, shirt unbuttoned just enough to pretend he didn't try. His expression froze. He knew me immediately, but instead of guilt or surprise, he smirked, like I was the mailman with bad timing. Ellis, he said, you didn't RSVP. I didn't respond. I just stepped past him, and there she was, Shayla, standing at the head of the table, glass in hand, surrounded by people who didn't know the man she erased was now standing 10 feet away. Her eyes widened, just slightly. Not horror, not panic, just the irritation of someone whose narrative was cracking in real time. I didn't yell. I didn't accuse. I reached into my coat pocket, pulled out the velvet box, and set it gently beside her plate. The table fell silent. "This was supposed to be yours," I said quietly, my voice trembling not from rage, but from restraint. "I engraved it with the coordinates of where we met. Funny how places mean nothing when people change." She opened the box. Didn't touch the bracelet. "I just wanted you to know," I said, still calm, still standing, "that I'm not the man you told these people I was. I don't scream. I don't fight. But I remember everything." I turned to go, and right before I stepped out, I heard someone whisper, "Was that her ex?" She didn't answer, and that silence, her silence, said everything. I didn't go back to the motel right away. I just drove. No destination. No plan. The streets of Savannah blurred by like they were part of a dream I couldn't wake up from. What I'd done, what I'd said, it wasn't heroic or loud or explosive, but it was mine. For the first time in months, I hadn't shrunk. I hadn't given her the gift of my silence. And strangely, it didn't feel like revenge. It felt like escape. By the time I got back to the motel, there was a message waiting for me at the front desk. No name, just a room number. Handwritten, rushed. I knew it was her before I even asked. I stood outside the door for almost 10 minutes before knocking. Part of me hoped she wouldn't answer, that it would stay unfinished, that I could go home and let the memory rot without another conversation. But the door creaked open, and there she was. No makeup, no wine glass, no mask. She looked small. "You made your point," she said quietly, stepping aside to let me in. I didn't sit. I just stood there, staring at her like I was seeing her for the first time. And maybe I was. "You told people I left peacefully," I said. "You said I agreed to it." She looked away. "It was easier that way." "For who?" She didn't answer. The silence between us wasn't angry. It was surgical, like two people operating on the corpse of something they used to call love. I expected her to cry, to yell, to justify. But instead, she just slumped onto the edge of the bed and stared at the floor. "I didn't think you'd show up," she said after a while. "Not like that." "You didn't think I'd do anything," I replied. She flinched. A small one, but I saw it. The mask was cracking. "I didn't want to humiliate you," she said, softer now. "That's why I left the way I did." I laughed, but it came out broken. "You left me a flash drive, Shayla. You staged a performance. That wasn't mercy. That was erasure." She bit her lip, eyes glassy. "But still, no apology. Not even now. I didn't love him when it started," she whispered. "But he made me feel like I wasn't invisible." And there it was. The truth. Not noble. Not complicated. Just a need, a selfish one, wrapped in 1,000 little betrayals. "I was right there," I said. "For 10 years. I gave you everything I had, and you just edited me out." She looked up at me for the first time. "I didn't think you'd notice." That hurt more than anything else. Not the cheating. Not the lies. Not the planning. It was the belief that I would go quietly. That I would take the hit and disappear. That I wasn't worth the mess. I walked to the door, my hand on the knob. "You didn't think I'd notice?" I said, turning back. "I noticed everything. I just loved you too much to say it out loud." And I left. This time, I closed the door. The drive home was quiet, but something inside me had shifted. It wasn't peace exactly. Not yet. But it was the absence of weight. Like I had finally stopped dragging a version of myself she had outgrown years ago. For the first time in what felt like forever, I wasn't thinking about how to fix things. I wasn't planning the next apology or rehearsing words she'd never hear. I was just breathing. I didn't tell anyone what happened. Not at first. I let the world believe whatever version she had told it. I didn't need to correct her story. I had already lived mine. I went back to work. I started eating real meals again. I gave myself permission to stop checking her social media, to stop imagining what her new life looked like. I focused on mine. A few weeks later, Morgan texted me. Just 2 words. She moved. I didn't ask where. I didn't need to. It no longer mattered. What mattered was the bracelet. I kept it, not as a reminder of her, but of me, of the man who tried, the man who stayed, the man who stood up and left last. I still keep it in a drawer near my keys, not out of grief, but because it represents the day I stopped disappearing. I've started seeing someone new. It's early, uncomplicated. Her name is Brenna, and she laughs with her whole face, not just her mouth. She doesn't flinch when I pause mid-sentence. She listens. She asks. Sometimes I catch myself waiting for the twist, the moment she grows tired of my softness. But so far it hasn't come. I'm not naive anymore. I know people can leave. I know love can rot quietly while you're still in the room. But I also know I survived it. I rebuilt. And I didn't need to destroy anyone to do it. If you're still watching, let me ask you something. What moment in history would you go back to? Not to change it, but just to understand it better. Let me know in the comments. I'd really like to read your thoughts. And if this story meant something to you, consider liking, subscribing, and joining us next time, right here on Reddit Confessions.